Much as he loved the Dutch tulips, Louis XIV, King of France, hated the Dutch. He hated their Protestantism. He hated their political pretensions. He hated them for giving asylum to French Calvinists and Republicans, and for their commercial and financial success. Maintaining that their territories were the inheritance of his wife Maria Teresa, daughter of the King of Spain, he invaded the Netherlands in 1672 with the finest army in the world. He soon occupied Utrecht, and although by piercing their walls and dikes, the Dutch flooded 200 square miles around Amsterdam and thus held up the French advance, Louis went on to capture Maastricht. By 1678, despite the defection of their allies and the help afforded to the Dutch by those countries that entered the war on the side of the United Provinces, the French were able to dictate the terms of the Treaty of Nijmegen. Louis XIV was now the dominant figure in Europe. He set about establishing the supreme power of the monarchy, bringing the nobility to heel, extending the kingdom's frontiers, leading large armies upon expeditions of foreign conquest, and curbing the privileges of the Huguenots, eventually revoking in 1685 the Edict of Nantes, by which Henri IV had granted them a large measure of religious liberty. At the same time, he began to make Paris a city worthy of his own greatness. Having prudently avoided the civil war in England by traveling on the continent, John Evelyn, the diarist, came to Paris in 1651 and on September the 7th called upon Thomas Hobbes, whose masterpiece of political philosophy, Leviathan, had just been published. And from an upper window of Hobbes' house, the two Englishmen looked down upon the whole equipage and glorious cavalcade of the young French monarch Louis XIV passing to Parliament. Horsemen and trumpeters, foot guards and pages, heralds and marshals, grandees of the court, gallant cavaliers habited in scarlet-coloured satin, Swiss and black velvet toques, lieutenants generals of provinces magnificently mounted, and members of the nobility exceeding splendid, all passed proudly by in the street below, followed by the king himself upon a splendidly caparisoned white horse. He was like a young Apollo, in a suit covered with rich embroidery, going almost the whole way with his hat in hand, saluting the ladies and acclamators who had filled the windows with their beauty, and the air with "Vive le Roi!" Indeed, he seemed a prince of a grave yet sweet countenance, now but in the 14th year of his age. He had already been king for 8 years, but was still quite content to leave public affairs in the capable hands of his godfather, Cardinal Mazzarino, and the supervision of his private conduct to his mother, Queen Anne, daughter of King Felipe III of Spain. When Mazzarino was dying in 1661, however, he urgently enjoined the young man to take up the government himself, to rule personally. "Govern," the cardinal said, "govern. Let the politicians be your servants, never your masters." The king cried bitterly when told that the cardinal, whom both he and his mother loved, was dead. But he quickly recovered himself and informed the council in a firm voice, "In future I shall be my own chief minister." And this he became. Devoting himself to this task, He worked hard, supervising every aspect of government, considering himself by divine right an autocrat whom the nobility, summoned to his court, were obliged to revere. It was not difficult to revere him. Even his enemies agreed that he was a most intelligent and attractive man. He had a finely proportioned face, framed by flowing, curling brown hair as beautiful as any woman's. Tall and broad-shouldered, he walked with exquisite grace. Women who looked at him often found it difficult to turn away until he disconcertingly returned their gaze through dark, mysterious, half-closed eyes. He was married at the age of 22 to his first cousin, Maria Teresa, daughter of Felipe IV of Spain, whom he did not find in the least prepossessing, though she seemed kind and good-tempered. She was distressingly stocky. Her clothes and hairstyle were old-fashioned. She looked as if she might smell of mothballs. She spoke French haltingly, with a heavy Spanish accent. She ate a great deal of garlic and chocolate flavored with cloves, which made her teeth black. She had little conversation and no wit. But Louis was a polite young man, and he tried not to let her know that he found her so unappealing and boring. He dutifully made love to her every other week and looked elsewhere for pleasure. He found it with his mistresses and at his country palaces. He did not care for Paris. His childhood had been passed in the days of the Fronde, those uprisings of the nobles and the Parliament of Paris against the royal government, and at that time he had known poverty, adversity, humiliation, even cold and hunger. His sheets were so full of holes, so one of his valets de chambre recorded, that I have found him several times with his legs sticking through them on the mattress. He could never forgive the nobles, and he could never forgive Paris or the Parisians. He was urged by his ministers to live in the Louvre, the rambling palace which had developed over the centuries on the right bank, where a 13th century king had built a square castle beside the medieval city wall. But Louis had no intention of living in Paris. He was instead to spend a fortune on converting the modest country house which his father had built as a maison de plaisance at Versailles au Val de Galie.